Welcome, Wargamers, to one of the darkest corners of the mortal realm, specifically the Realm of Fire, Aqshy, because today we are talking about the city of Anvilguard, or Kuron as it's also known. You see, recently, as we were kind of leading up to the release of 4th edition, I put a poll out on my channel, the community page, asking people what kind of place would they want to go next. We have a few different supplements, specifically that come from Cubicle 7, who make the Age of Sigmar role-playing game, and they do a wonderful job of fleshing out different environments throughout the mortal realms. Well, they actually have an immense amount of literature surrounding the Realm of Fire, and I asked the poll, and then of course it makes sense that they all chose Anvilguard because it's set where the story is happening now, right? What we've seen now from 4th edition is that the Skaven just blew the Realm of Fire a new blowhole and erupted Blight City out of the ground and made it all kinds of crazy. So I thought, what a fun way to introduce Aqshy in a way that also, has some relevance to the main plotline going on. Of course, like I said, we're going to focus mostly on Anvilguard, but we're going to use that in the future as a gateway to the greater Realm of Fire. Like I said, from Cubicle 7, they have put a whole bunch of material out regarding Anvilguard. It now has a deep and rich backstory to explore, and if you and your party take it up in the game Soulbound, which is their role-playing game for AOS, there is a lot going on. You can do everything from ship battles to mysteries in the city to fighting in its frontiers. It really is this entire region of the world, and it gives us a real good sense of what Aqshy is like, so it is very relevant to everything going on. And so today we are going to get into that headspace, what the Realm of Fire is like, do an Aqshy vibe check, if you will, and begin exploring one of the most narratively important cities that Games Workshop has written for Age of Sigmar. It is dynamic in a way that most other cities are not. So we're going to talk about how it's set up, its criminal enterprises, its rebels or freedom fighters, depending on your perspective, and the history of a city that's passed through the hands of gods themselves. Now, one thing I'd like to add up top, if you're interested in this video or Age of Sigmar in general, please consider using any of the affiliate links in my description down below. But one I actually want to shout out specifically is this week I got a message from Baron of Dice. There are now official 2+ tough dice, and anytime you buy one of those, I get a cut of the profits, and it is the best way to directly support me, my wife, our cats, the whole family. And so if you want to roll 6s, 1/6 of the time every time, get yourself some 2+ tough dice. But of course, if there's any other hobby supplies you need, you'll see exactly how much money you save, and those discounts will be applied to your card at checkout. Thank you all so much from Jess and I, from the bottom of our hearts. Now, for those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the setting, right? We have a lot of people coming in with 4th edition, the setting being Aqshy in general, because that's where a lot of the action's happening that we've seen. Well, Anvilguard is a city in the Realm of Fire, Aqshy, as we mentioned, and it's held, there's kind of an asterisk next to this statement, but it's kind of held by the collective forces of order. A mix of different fantasy archetypes. You have dwarves, which GW calls Dwarden, elves, humans, etc. And the city is awesome because of how much of its history we as Age of Sigmar players have seen. By that I mean, when this game system launched in 2015 with Edition 1, Anvilguard didn't exist. It was founded in a campaign arc called the Seeds of Hope. It was this big campaign thing where you can go in and play games in stores and then rack up points, and it saw all, or I should say nearly all, of the major cities of Sigmar that we know now getting founded. Hammerhall was exploding onto the scene, the Living City, Phoenicium, Anvilguard, and more. And even back when it was founded, there were a few things that made Anvilguard interesting, especially compared to the other cities that were founded at the same time. First off, it is a port city on a massive ocean shore that is also next to a very, very dense jungle. Now, normally this means very little. We have lots of places like that in our real world where the jungle dead ends at the ocean. There's some sparse beach, maybe, that kind of stuff. But what makes this interesting is that this is the Realm of Fire. Okay, what does jungle look like in a scorched land? What does it mean for the seas to be kind of infused with fire magic? Or are they just boiling cauldrons all the time? How does this actually work? Well, the nice thing is Anvilguard isn't far from the center of the realm, if you know how the realms basically work in AOS. The closer to the center you are, And they are shaped kind of like discs. Imagine a record, if you will. The closer to the center of the record you are, things are very stable. And this is how they kind of get around what kind of fantasy AOS is, in my opinion. Like, if you're in the center, it's so stable that, like, you could just have Lord of the Rings. Maybe some of the size and the scale and the fact that magic exists is different, but generally speaking, from what you and I would recognize from most other fantasy archetypes, that's kind of what it is. If you get out to the edge of the realm, however, is when things get kind of crazy, and that's where we see, boiling oceans and all that kind of nut stuff. So, like I said, thankfully we're near the center, so it's not quite as extreme, so these different biomes can exist together. But also, the way that this city uses that environment is equally fascinating. We'll dig into that a bit more, but on a surface level, being a mostly naval city, right, it has lots of trade, lots of ships coming and going. They have a lot of connections to Iden Deepkin, and they've established themselves, as you would imagine, as one of the premier naval powers, especially in Aqshy. Not only do they have enough supplies, right, it'd be just to make ships from all the woods inside the jungle. You build a bunch of ships, you have a heavily fortified port, but also you have to remember, the Scourge privateers are an order of Dark Elf that sail the waters in every realm, but they are fond of places that do not ask a lot of questions on how they conduct themselves. So we were thinking pirates, slavers, hunters, smugglers. They're not evil in the chaos sense of evil, but they're not nice. And in fact, one of the notable things about Anvilguard when it was first announced in its flavor text was this idea that it has a disproportionate population of what we would know from the old world as Dark Elves. Daughters of Cain, Scourge privateers, all of that. Tons of Daughters of Cain temples. And the culture of Anvilguard reflects this. Your civic leaders tend to be those who literally outlive everybody else. Like, it's mostly elves because they'll just outlive everybody else that's voting against them over time. There's a massive crime population. And overall, it's just a place where people don't ask a lot of questions. And I want to make something clear. It was never put forward there that, like, Dark Elves as a species or whatever are criminal and evil. It's that their societal structure operates on kind of this, like, mix of faux classy hierarchy and sort of a gang structure. You, as an individual, have to, like, decide what you want to do, manipulate, coerce, get the resources to make it happen, and then execute on your vision. It's a very authoritarian structure, but not necessarily evil. There's tons of great stories of Dark Elf heroes fighting on the forces of good that just want good things. The city works because there are groups at all levels who can get something that you want. Essentially, that's how the civic function is, right? We can get what you want and we can do it discreetly. It's a travel hub, it's a place for cargo ships and explorers alike to resupply and re-equip, and maybe add some discreet cargo to those ships as they set back out from wherever they came from. And the city sat at that kind of narrative depth for quite a while. It was just kind of this seedy underbelly of the side of order. We knew that there was an influx, we'll say, of Dark Elves and their various sub-factions, but that was really it. That is until the events of Broken Realms, specifically Broken Realms Morathi. It's a campaign series that shook up a whole lot of things regarding AOS, and it's kind of what led us into 3rd edition. But what's relevant here, I'm going to just pick one story out of that whole campaign series, is that the character from the old world Morathi essentially made good on her plans to ascend to godhood. There was actually a fantastic whole story about how she deceives Sigmar, manipulates him into getting all the materials she needs necessary for this big ritual. Well, when she ascends to this level of deity, it's kind of a vague status in AOS, but when she gets there, the first thing she wants to do is claim her own territory. All these other gods have their own places, their own realms of existence that they can go about at their own leisure. And while Morathi already had a bunch of, minor settlements and temples for Daughters of Cain all over the place, she wanted a chair at the big kids' table of Order gods. And so she took one of their seats. She took Anvilguard. So the next big development story-wise for Anvilguard was that we all got to see what happened when AOS entered this new, or had a new god enter the scene. Essentially, she immediately stole a piece of Sigmar's empire. Morathi had sown corruption, disunity, and mutinous cravings into the heart of Anvilguard citizens, and all of it was governed by criminal organizations. She essentially So she got all the criminals on her side, which then used their influence to corrupt government officials, and the whole thing pretty much just fell into her palm when she was ready for it. This big rebellion happened, and the city was officially renamed Anvilguard to Kuron in the Druki tongue. Now, of course, Anvilguard is still a name that's used because people know it as both things, right? This is a big scandalous event in the history of the mortal realms. It was a big fracturing moment for the pantheon of order. My point being, if you have an army that's themed from one or the other, Kuron or Anvilguard, they both work. There are people who are holding out in the city, hoping one day Sigmar will come back and reclaim it as Anvilguard. Like, there's all kinds of that. There's, like I said, rebels or freedom fighters, depending on your point of view, who are part of the old cities of Sigmar regiments there, the Free Guild regiments, who are desperately trying to take the city back, even though at this point they're nothing more than like guerrilla warfare type fighters. They lost the army, they lost the city, they lost it all, but they still want it. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. That's the lore we know about Anvilguard through the major events of Age of Sigmar, right? The major narrative arcs of the mainstream game. But as I said before, these videos are going to be exploring the city on the ground level as well, just like we did for Ulfenkarn. Its districts, its secrets, the power brokers involved. We will explore what made this city blossom into a bustling and profitable metropolis based on a little bit of darkness, but, you know, its success is success. And also look at the dour desperation that poisons its every vein. And so if you're interested in following along with this video series and what we're going to be covering here, then I highly recommend grabbing the AOS book Soulbound. It's the role-playing game that's made by Cubicle 7. We're going to be going through a whole bunch of different Cubicle 7 resources. So if you are someone who's looking to get set up playing that game with your group, this series should hopefully introduce the city to you. There's the Anvilguard City Guide, but then there's also a series of adventures called the Shadow in the Mists campaign that takes players on a journey through various parts of the city, its outlying regions, boat battles, all of that stuff we mentioned before. I won't spoil any plot points for you. This is all just stuff the locals would know, but the series of adventures has you fighting all over the place. It's a great deal of fun. And so I'd like to end this video, like I end all of them, by asking the simple question, why is this cool? It has been great to see the evolution of this place, right? The other cities get wrecked, right? In the case of Phoenicium and Vindicarum just absolutely get raffle-stomped in campaigns. Or they kind of grow vaguely, like we don't really see the evolution of Hammerhall. It just kind of is bigger one day the next time they mention it in a story. But Anvilguard had a story there too, which is different. It's going to come up more as we explore the different like sub-regions and stuff like that, but the diversity of motivations and personalities in one city are crazy. You have religious warrior zealots in the Daughters of Cain, but they're in the middle of their own little schism right now. The Croneseer Herald was introduced in the last campaign series, and that whole model represents the idea that there are people who look at Morathi and see her as a liar, but they're Daughters of Cain that see her as the liar, which is very interesting. So there's like a religious schism happening. There's the Scourge Privateers with a grip on the criminal underworld, as well as a massive stranglehold on all of the overseas trade and basically how safely things make it to and out of Kuron on a daily basis. And then there's still just the normal military. There's still free guild regiments and so on, but the upheaval in the city has created a whole side arc of folks who, like I said before, want it restored to Sigmar. It's a fascinating place for game masters to have because with the mix of threats on the outside of the city and also the duplicitous nature of many of the characters inside it, there's a great mix of like hard and soft skills to be able to use for role-playing. You know what I mean? Like if you're someone who really specs into charisma and you have a region that you fight in where it's all melee fighting or something like that, it feels kind of like a dud. I did that once accidentally. I had a character that just was not suited at all for the adventure we were on. But this is certainly a situation where there's enough happening that like the characters who have soft skills like persuasion, that kind of stuff, will be meaningful in the city. And, you know, since this is ultimately about a game in Cubicle 7s, that's awesome. That's just good to have that kind of stuff. Ulfenkarn, I felt like, leaned way heavier into the combat side with a few specific districts, but there's just places all throughout Anvilguard where Silver Tongue will get you a lot further than a sword. So anyway, friends, I hope you follow along and you enjoy this. Be sure to click like and subscribe if you want to learn more about AOS, or you just want something nice to listen to while you paint your models. That's basically all I do. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will catch you in my next video. Happy wargaming.